Let's see if the maintenance lady can fight. Officer Blake Turner's voice carried across the training room as he tossed a pair of padded gloves toward Simone Carter's worn work boots. The gloves landed with a soft slap against the blue mat, and 12 officers turned to watch. A phone camera was already recording. Someone laughed near the lockers. Another officer whispered that Blake had finally found an opponent he could beat without breaking a sweat. Simone remained beneath the flickering ceiling light, one hand resting on the aluminum ladder beside her, the other holding a screwdriver. She had come to repair a faulty fixture, nothing more. Her gray maintenance shirt carried a faint streak of dust across one shoulder, and a faded military bracelet circled her wrist, half hidden beneath her sleeve. Blake widened his stance for the camera and lifted his hands like a performer waiting for applause. "Come on," he said. "Show us what you know." Simone looked down at the gloves, then at his left knee. She noticed the way his heel angled outward and how his weight leaned too heavily onto one side. "You should fix your footing," she said quietly. The laughter grew louder. Blake glanced toward Lieutenant Mark Hensley, who stood near the wall with his arms crossed, smiling as though the room belonged to him. "Did everybody hear that?" Blake asked. "She's giving lessons now." Hensley did not stop him. He only nodded toward the mat, granting silent permission for the joke to continue. Simone placed the screwdriver inside her tool pouch and stepped down from the ladder. The fluorescent light above them buzzed, flashed once, and dimmed again. For a moment, her face moved through shadow and pale white light. She did not look embarrassed. She looked tired. That unsettled Blake more than anger would have. He wanted a reaction for the camera, a nervous laugh, a frightened excuse, anything that would make the officers behind him feel larger. Simone gave him nothing. She bent down, picked up the gloves, brushed a grain of dust from one of them, and placed both neatly on the bench. "I'm here to repair the lights," she said. "Not entertain you." The room answered with a low chorus of mock disappointment. Near the back, rookie officer Noah Reed shifted uncomfortably but kept his eyes on the floor. He had seen Blake turn training sessions into public humiliations before. Everyone had. No one challenged him because Blake was the department's rising star, the men whose polished demonstration videos collected thousands of views online. Hensley called it good publicity. Simone turned toward her ladder, but Blake stepped into her path. He was nearly a foot taller, dressed in a clean black training uniform, his badge clipped where everyone could see it. "You came into our room," he said. "You told a trained officer he was standing wrong. You don't get to walk away now." Simone's fingers tightened once around the ladder rail. Not from fear. From restraint. Her eyes moved past Blake toward the far side of the mat, where Noah had been practicing moments earlier. She had noticed the redness around his neck and the way he kept swallowing between breaths. She had also noticed Blake smiling while Noah struggled. Simone met Blake's gaze at last. "Being trained," she said, "doesn't mean you stopped learning." The laughter faded by half. Blake's smile remained, but something behind it hardened. He reached for the gloves and held them out again. Simone did not take them. Above their heads, the damaged light flickered rapidly, breaking the room into flashes of brightness and shadow. No one noticed the faded letters on her bracelet. No one recognized the name Carter stamped into the metal. And no one in that room understood why a woman holding a screwdriver had studied every exit before she ever looked at the men laughing at her. Simone returned her attention to the ladder, but the room no longer felt like a place where a simple repair could remain simple. The air smelled of rubber mats, metal lockers, and stale coffee from the paper cups lined along the wall. She had learned long ago that some rooms decided who you were before you spoke, and this one had already chosen for her. To them, she was the woman in a gray maintenance shirt, the woman who carried tools instead of authority, the woman expected to lower her eyes when men with badges laughed. Simone had spent years perfecting the art of becoming forgettable. She worked nights at the training center because the shift paid an extra $2 an hour and allowed her to be home before her daughter woke for school. Her mornings began in a small apartment 12 miles away, where medication bottles stood beside a bowl of cereal and a handwritten recovery schedule covered half the refrigerator. Her daughter, Lily, was 11 years old and 6 weeks past heart surgery. Every dollar Simone earned had a destination before it reached her account. Rent. Gas. Follow-up visits. A new set of compression shirts that Lily needed but hated wearing. There was no room in Simone's life for pride, arguments, or strangers with cameras. That was why she kept her answers short. That was why she never mentioned the years before maintenance work. People asked fewer questions when they believed they already understood you. Blake watched her climb 2 steps up the ladder and reached for the wall switch. He flicked it off, plunging the corner into shadow. "Hard to work without power," he said. Several officers laughed again. Simone looked down at him. "Hard to learn when no one corrects you." Noah Reed lifted his head at that. For the first time, his eyes met hers. He was young enough that the confidence of the room had not fully hardened inside him. A red mark curved along the side of his neck, and his breathing still carried a faint catch. Simone had noticed it the moment she entered. She noticed most things. The habit was older than her maintenance badge, older than Lily, older than the quiet life she had built. She could not enter a room without measuring distance. She could not stand near a doorway without knowing what blocked it. She could not watch someone train carelessly without seeing what might happen 5 seconds later. Blake mistook silence for ignorance. Men like him often did. He turned toward Noah and motioned him back onto the mat. "Come on, rookie. Let us show our guest what real training looks like." Noah hesitated. Hensley glanced at him, and the hesitation disappeared. He stepped forward because young officers learned quickly which commands were spoken and which were merely understood. Simone climbed down from the ladder. "His breathing is not steady," she said. Blake rolled his shoulders. "He is fine. He needs a minute. He needs confidence." Simone's gaze moved to Noah. "Do you feel ready?" The question surprised him. No one had asked. He opened his mouth, but Hensley answered first. "Officer Reed is ready when his instructor says he is ready." The words landed coldly. Simone felt something tighten beneath her ribs, not anger exactly, but recognition. She had heard that tone before in places where obedience mattered more than judgment. Her fingers brushed the worn metal bracelet at her wrist. The edge was smooth from years of touch. She pulled her sleeve lower and covered it. Blake stepped onto the center of the mat and raised his hands. Noah followed, slower this time. The officers around them shifted closer, creating a loose circle. The phone camera remained pointed toward the floor. Simone stood beside the ladder, still holding her screwdriver, and watched Noah take one careful breath. Then Blake smiled and told him not to stop until someone said so. Simone already knew who would have to say it. Blake moved first, not with urgency, but with the easy confidence of someone who believed the room had already chosen a winner. Noah mirrored him, shoulders tight, feet uncertain against the mat. The officers formed a wider circle, their attention shifting away from Simone and toward the lesson they had seen too many times before. Blake liked to teach through pressure. Hensley liked the results because fear looked efficient from a distance. Noah raised his hands and tried to settle his breathing, but the red mark along his neck darkened as he swallowed. Simone set her screwdriver on the lowest step of the ladder. The small click of metal against aluminum sounded strangely clear beneath the buzzing lights. Blake guided Noah into position and spoke loudly enough for the phone to record every word. "Out there, nobody gives you time to think. You either control the moment or the moment controls you." Hensley nodded with approval. It was the kind of sentence that sounded wise until someone used it as permission to ignore another person's limits. Noah shifted backward. "Lieutenant, I think I need a minute." Blake smiled without looking away from him. "That is your doubt talking." Simone watched Noah's chest rise too quickly. His right hand flexed near his side, and the color had begun to drain from his face. She had seen that pattern in exhausted recruits, injured workers, and frightened people pretending not to be frightened because authority was watching. She stepped closer to the edge of the mat. He asked for a minute. Every face turned toward her again. Hensley's expression hardened. "This is a controlled training environment, Miss Carter." He emphasized her last name as though reading it from a work order. "Officer Turner knows what he is doing." Simone looked at Blake's stance, then at Noah's unsteady knees. "Then he should know when to stop." A low murmur moved through the circle. Blake released Noah and turned toward her, his smile thinner now. The phone camera followed. "You keep talking like you have done this before." Simone did not answer. Silence had protected her for years. It kept old records buried, old questions unanswered, and strangers from connecting the quiet woman changing light fixtures to anything beyond the uniform she wore. Blake stepped off the mat and came within several feet of her. What exactly makes you qualified to judge my training? Simone could feel every officer waiting for her to retreat. She could also feel the worn bracelet beneath her sleeve pressing lightly against her wrist. She remembered another room, another set of men who confused rank with wisdom, and an order that had cost too much to obey. She pushed the memory down. I do not need a title to recognize when someone cannot breathe properly. Noah lowered his head, ashamed that his discomfort had become public. Simone softened her voice. There is nothing weak about saying you need to stop. The words were meant for him, but they struck the room differently. Hensley unfolded his arms. Officer Reed will continue. Noah looked at Simone for less than a second. It was enough. She saw the fear he was trying to hide and the obedience holding him in place. Blake returned to the mat, more determined now to prove that her warning meant nothing. He instructed Noah to step closer. Noah obeyed. The distance between them narrowed. Simone's body became still. The officers mistook that stillness for surrender, but Noah saw something else. Her shoulders had lowered. Her breathing had slowed. Her eyes no longer followed Blake's face. They tracked his hands, his footing, and the space around Noah. The damaged light flashed overhead, turning the mat white, then gray, then white again. Blake reached for Noah and began another controlled demonstration, but his movements carried more pride than patience. Noah tried to follow the instructions, yet his balance slipped. He tapped Blake's arm once, quietly asking to pause. Blake continued speaking to the camera. Noah tapped again. This time Simone stepped onto the edge of the mat. Hensley raised one hand in warning. Do not interfere. Simone did not look at him. Her attention remained fixed on Noah, whose breath had become a thin, uneven sound beneath Blake's explanation. She set one foot forward and spoke with a calm that silenced even the officers near the lockers. He has asked twice. Let him go. Blake finally looked at her. The amusement had vanished from his face. Around them, no one laughed. The joke had ended, but something more dangerous had taken its place, a room full of people waiting to see whether authority would listen to the truth. Blake held Noah in place for one more second, not because the demonstration required it, but because Simone had told him to stop. Pride had turned a simple training exercise into a test of authority, and everyone in the room could feel the difference. Noah's shoes shifted against the mat. His breath caught again. Simone stepped forward. Release him, she said. Her voice remained low, yet it carried farther than Hensley's orders ever had. Blake looked toward the phone camera, aware that every officer was watching him. Letting go now would mean admitting that the maintenance worker had seen something he had missed. He is learning to stay calm under pressure, Blake said. Simone moved closer, stopping several feet away. He cannot learn while he is fighting. For air. Noah tapped Blake's arm a third time. The sound was faint, almost lost beneath the ceiling light's electric buzz. Simone did not hesitate. She reached the edge of the mat and placed one hand near Blake's wrist, not striking, not twisting, only guiding the pressure away with a precise motion so smooth that Noah stepped free before anyone understood what had changed. He bent forward, pulling in a full breath. Simone immediately moved beside him. Slowly, she said. In through your nose. Out through your mouth. Noah followed her voice. The color began returning to his face. Blake stared at his empty hands. The officers nearest the lockers stopped smiling. There had been no struggle, no dramatic collision, nothing that could be dismissed as luck. Simone had simply recognized the problem and solved it. Hensley crossed the mat with measured steps. You were told not to interfere. Simone kept her attention on Noah. He told you to stop. This is a police training facility. Then the people inside it should understand consent better than anyone. The sentence settled over the room like dust after a door slammed. Noah straightened carefully. She is right, Lieutenant. I asked to pause. Hensley's jaw tightened. The admission did more damage to his control than Simone's intervention had. He looked around at the other officers, searching for the easy loyalty he usually received. Several avoided his eyes. Blake recovered first. "She caught me off guard," he said. "That is all." Simone rose slowly. "This is not about catching anyone off guard." Blake stepped closer, his face warm with embarrassment. "You touched my arm like you knew exactly what you were doing." Simone glanced toward the ladder, the unfinished light, and the tool pouch waiting beside it. She could still leave. She could collect her equipment, report the delay, and return home before Lily's evening medication. That was the sensible choice. It was the choice she had made for years whenever strangers tried to pull her back toward a life she no longer claimed. Then she saw Noah rubbing the side of his neck while Hensley watched him with disappointment instead of concern. Some habits were harder to bury than names and records. Simone looked at Blake's left leg. His knee had begun to turn inward again. "Your balance is unstable," she said. "You are putting pressure in the wrong place." Blake gave a short laugh, but no one joined him. "Then show me." Simone shook her head. "You do not need a demonstration. You need to listen." Hensley stepped between them, though his expression suggested he was protecting Blake's reputation, not Simone's safety. "You have made serious claims about one of my best instructors. Either prove you understand this work, or return to yours." Simone looked at the lieutenant for a long moment. The damaged light flickered above him, cutting his polished badge into brief flashes of silver. She understood the trap. If she refused, they would call her afraid. If she agreed, they would turn her into entertainment. Behind Hensley, Blake lifted the gloves again. Noah quietly said, "You do not have to do this." Simone heard the sincerity in his voice. She also heard something else, shame that he had needed help, and fear that asking for it would follow him through the department. She turned toward him. "You did nothing wrong." Then she faced the others. "I will step onto the mat for one reason. When someone says stop, the lesson stops." Blake's smile returned, but it no longer looked certain. Simone removed her work gloves and placed them beside the screwdriver. As she rolled back her sleeves, the faded military bracelet slipped into view. Hensley did not notice the engraved letters. Blake did not notice the change in her breathing. Only Noah saw how completely still she became before taking one quiet step onto the mat. Writing, variant equals, document, ID equals, 41837. Simone stood at the edge of the mat with her hands relaxed at her sides while Blake circled her as if the outcome had already been decided. The officers tightened around them, leaving a clear space beneath the flickering light. Hensley raised his phone higher, eager to capture the moment when the maintenance worker finally embarrassed herself. Simone looked once toward Noah. His breathing had steadied, but worry remained in his eyes. She gave him a small nod, then turned back to Blake. "The moment either person says stop, this ends," she said. Blake rolled his shoulders and smiled. "You already said that. I need to know you understand it." A few officers exchanged glances. Blake gave an impatient nod. Hensley announced that the exercise had begun, but Simone did not move. Blake stepped forward, testing her reaction with a quick reach toward her shoulder. She shifted half a step aside, allowing his hand to pass through empty air. The movement was so small that several officers missed it. Blake tried again, faster this time. Simone changed the angle between them and remained beyond his reach. There was no display, no flourish, only quiet distance and perfect timing. The laughter around the mat thinned. Blake's smile faded. "Fight back," he said. "I am trying to keep this controlled. You are stalling." He moved closer, expecting her to retreat, but Simone held her ground. For one brief second, he hesitated. She saw his left knee turn inward exactly as she had warned. "Reset your footing," she said. The advice felt like another insult in front of the camera. Blake ignored it and continued pressing forward. Simone guided his arm away, then stepped aside before his weight could follow. He stumbled one pace, caught himself, and turned with color rising in his face. No one laughed now. Hensley lowered the phone slightly. "Enough circling," he said. "Show us whether you actually know anything." Simone looked at him. Control is knowing when not to force a movement. Blake heard the lesson as humiliation. He reached for a padded training baton resting beside the mat. Noah immediately stepped forward. That was not part of the agreement. Hensley held up one hand. It is a training tool. Simone watched Blake's grip tighten around the foam-covered handle. She could leave. Every practical part of her mind told her to step off the mat, collect her tools, and go home. Lily would be waiting at the kitchen table with her science homework spread beside the evening medication. Simone had promised to bring soup from the diner on Westbrook Avenue. None of this belonged in that promise. Then Blake moved, not carefully, but carelessly, driven by the need to recover what he believed the room had taken from him. Simone lifted one arm to redirect the padded baton away from her shoulder. The motion pulled back her sleeve. Her old bracelet slipped loose, struck the mat, and spun beneath the white light. The metal settled near Noah's shoe with the engraving facing upward. Carter. Rescue Unit 17. Noah stared at it, but there was no time to ask. Blake's footing shifted again, and his left knee buckled beneath the pressure of his own movement. Simone stepped in before he could fall badly. She caught his arm, turned his momentum, and lowered him onto the mat with controlled precision, supporting the back of his head until he was safely down. The room went silent. Blake looked up at her, stunned, his breath shallow with surprise rather than pain. Simone released him immediately and stepped back. "Stop," he said at last. She did. No victory pose. No smile. No satisfaction. She simply lowered herself beside him and checked his injured knee without touching it. "Do not try to stand yet," she said. Blake's face tightened with embarrassment. "Get away from me." Simone remained calm. "Your knee is unstable. Moving too soon could make it worse." Hensley pushed through the circle, his concern fixed more on the camera than on Blake. "Turn that recording off," he ordered. Noah did not move. He was still looking down at the bracelet near his shoe. Simone reached for it, but the training room door opened before her fingers touched the metal. A wooden cane tapped once against the floor outside. Then a deep, familiar voice filled the silence. "Where did you get that bracelet, Colin?" The wooden cane tapped against the floor once more as Chief Combat Instructor Elias Grant entered the room. He moved slowly, but every officer straightened as though a command had already been given. His silver hair was cut close, his dark training jacket zipped neatly to the collar, and his expression carried the quiet weight of a man who never needed to raise his voice. He looked first at Blake on the mat, then at Simone kneeling beside him, and finally at the bracelet lying between them. "I asked where you got that," Grant said. Simone's hand paused. Inches above the metal. For the first time since entering the training center, her calm seemed to narrow into something guarded. "It belongs to me." Grant's eyes lifted to her face. The room became so still that the damaged light sounded louder than before, its faint electrical hum spreading across the ceiling. Hensley stepped forward quickly. "Chief, there has been a misunderstanding." Miss Carter interfered with a scheduled exercise. Grant did not look at him. "Was I speaking to you?" Hensley stopped. Noah bent down, picked up the bracelet, and held it carefully by the edge. Grant extended one hand. When Noah placed it in his palm, the older man turned it toward the light. The engraved letters caught the pale glow. Carter. Rescue Unit 17. Something changed in Grant's face. It was not surprise alone. It was recognition mixed with an old pain he had carried so long that it seemed built into the lines around his eyes. "Stand back," he told the officers. The circle opened immediately. Simone remained beside Blake, studying his knee. "It is beginning to swell," she said. "He needs ice and a medical evaluation before he puts weight on it." Blake looked away from her, humiliated by the concern in her voice. She could have left him there. Everyone knew it. Instead, she took a folded towel from the equipment shelf and placed it beneath his lower leg to keep it supported. Her hands moved with patient certainty. No anger. No triumph. Only care. Grant watched every motion. "How long has it been?" he asked. Simone did not pretend to misunderstand. 12 years. You disappeared. I left. That is not the same thing. Simone finally looked up at him. The cold light reflected along the edge of the bracelet in his hand. It was the same to the people who signed the papers. The officers exchanged confused glances. Hensley's confidence began to thin. He looked from Grant to Simone, realizing there was a history in the room that his authority could not reach. Grant stepped closer. His cane pressed into the mat with a soft rubber sound. "You should have called." Simone turned her attention back to Blake. "I had a daughter to raise." "That was not what I meant." No. Blake shifted and winced. Simone placed one hand near his shoulder without forcing him still. "Do not move yet. The ambulance team will want to see the position as it is." Blake's voice came out quieter than before. "Why are you helping me?" Simone met his eyes. The question seemed to surprise her more than the challenge had. "Because you are hurt." Nothing else followed. No accusation. No reminder of the camera, the laughter, or the gloves thrown at her feet. Just the answer. Blake looked away again, but this time shame, not pride, pulled his gaze downward. The room fell into a different silence, one that no longer belonged to authority. Grant closed his fingers around the bracelet. 12 years earlier, in a collapsed training structure outside Fort Bragg, he had asked the same question after waking beneath broken concrete and smoke. Why had she come back for him after the order had been given to withdraw? Her answer had been nearly identical. "Because you were still there." He looked at Simone now and saw the same steady hands, the same refusal to abandon someone merely because leaving would be easier. Hensley began to speak again, but Grant raised one finger. "No one says another word until the recording is preserved and medical support arrives." The phone in Hensley's hand lowered. Noah moved toward the door to make the call. Grant remained beside Simone, holding the bracelet as though it were proof of something the rest of the room had failed to see. Above them, the faulty light flickered once, then stayed on. The medical team arrived within minutes, carrying a compact brace and a rolling case through the open doorway. Simone moved aside only after she had explained exactly what happened to Blake's knee and how long he had remained still. One of the paramedics glanced at her maintenance uniform, then at the careful support beneath Blake's leg. "You have medical training?" he asked. Simone shook her head. "Enough field experience to know when not to make something worse." Grant heard the answer and lowered his eyes to the bracelet in his hand. Hensley stood near the wall, his phone no longer raised, while Noah transferred the original recording to the secure training server under Grant's instruction. The laughter from earlier felt impossible now, like a sound left behind in another room. Once Blake was taken for evaluation, Grant asked everyone to remain. He walked to the center of the mat and placed the bracelet in his open palm. 12 years ago, he said, I was part of a joint training operation at a collapsed concrete facility outside Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Simone's face tightened slightly. She knew what was coming and did not want it. Grant continued anyway. A structural failure trapped 3 people inside. Command ordered the rescue team to withdraw because the remaining section was unstable. Several officers looked toward Simone. She stood near her ladder, one hand resting against the cool aluminum rail. Staff Sergeant Simone Carter refused to leave while 2 civilians and 1 instructor were still inside. Grant's voice remained controlled, but the cane beneath his hand trembled once. That instructor was me. Hensley's mouth opened, then closed. Noah stared at Simone as though the gray uniform had become transparent, revealing a history none of them had bothered to imagine. Grant turned the bracelet over. She entered again without recognition, without a camera, and without any promise that someone would reward her. She brought out the civilians first. Then she came back for me. Simone looked toward the ceiling light. You were still alive, she said quietly. That was the job. Grant's expression sharpened with emotion. No. The order was to withdraw. The order was wrong. The words were simple, but they changed the air. Hensley shifted his weight. He had spent years teaching officers that obedience proved discipline. Simone had just exposed the difference between following authority and serving what was right. Grant looked at the others. She lost her position because she challenged that order. The final report called her insubordinate. It did not say that 3 people went home because of her. Simone's hand moved unconsciously toward the empty place on her wrist. I did not come here for this. I know, Grant said. You came to repair a light. The damaged fixture hummed above them, now glowing steadily. Hensley tried to recover control. Chief, whatever happened years ago does not change the fact that she disrupted training today. Grant turned toward him slowly. The recording will determine what happened today. Noah stood straighter beside the secure console. It shows Officer Reed asking to stop 3 times, he said. It also shows Officer Turner continuing after each request. No one challenged him. Grant looked at Simone again. And when Officer Turner was injured? Noah answered before she could. She helped him. Grant nodded. Of course she did. Simone finally met his eyes. Do not turn me into a symbol, Elias. The use of his first name startled the room more than any rank could have. I am not asking for praise. Then what are you asking for? Simone glanced toward Noah, then toward the officers who had laughed when the gloves landed at her feet. For them to understand that control is not the same as strength. Grant held her gaze for a long moment. Then he stepped off the mat, placed his cane beside the bench, and stood as straight as his injured leg allowed. Every officer watched as the most respected combat instructor in the department brought one hand to his chest and bowed deeply before the woman they had mistaken for someone beneath them. Grant remained bowed for several seconds, long enough for the meaning to settle into every corner of the room. Simone did not smile. She did not step forward to accept the gesture like an award. She only stood beside the ladder with one sleeve rolled back and the empty place on her wrist exposed. When Grant straightened, his eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. This is not for what you did on this mat, he said. It is for the person you remained afterward. No one moved. Hensley stared at the floor. Noah stood near the secure console, one hand resting beside the saved recording. The officers who had laughed earlier now seemed unable to look directly at Simone. She crossed the mat and held out her hand. Grant placed the bracelet in her palm. The metal was warm from his grip. Simone fastened it around her wrist without ceremony. I did not come here to reopen the past, she said. Then we will deal with the present, Grant replied. He turned toward Noah. Play the recording from the beginning. The room filled with Blake's earlier voice, loud and amused, followed by laughter as the gloves landed near Simone's boots. No one laughed this time. The recording continued through Noah's repeated requests to stop, Hensley's refusal to intervene, and Simone's warning about Blake's unstable footing. Every careless moment returned with perfect clarity. Hensley watched himself raise the phone instead of protecting the people under his command. His face lost color. When the video ended, Grant let the silence remain. Lieutenant Hensley, he said, you will surrender your training authority pending a formal review. Hensley lifted his head. Chief, I was trying to maintain discipline. You were protecting humiliation because it entertained the room. Grant's words were quiet, but they carried no space for argument. Officer Turner will also be removed from instructional duty while his conduct is reviewed. The fact that Ms. Carter prevented a worse injury does not erase what led to it. Simone stepped forward. He needs correction, not destruction. Hensley looked at her in disbelief. She had every reason to demand the harshest possible consequence. Instead, her voice held the same restraint she had shown on the mat. People repeat what a system rewards, she continued. If you remove one man and leave the culture untouched, another man will take his place. Grant studied her. What would you change? Simone looked around the training room. The walls were covered with photographs of competition winners, tactical awards, and slogans about dominance. There was nothing about judgment, restraint, or listening. Teach them that stopping is part of control, she said. Teach them that authority does not make every decision right. And teach them that the person in front of them is still a person when no one is recording. Noah lowered his eyes, absorbing every word. One of the older officers near the lockers quietly removed his training gloves and set them on the bench. Grant nodded. Effective immediately, all instructors will complete a review of de-escalation standards, duty of care, and intervention responsibility. Every officer in this room will participate. He turned toward Noah. Including those who remained silent. Noah swallowed. Yes, sir. Simone looked at him. Silence can be fear before it becomes permission. Next time, speak earlier. Noah nodded, ashamed but grateful that she had offered him a next time. The door opened, and Blake returned in a wheelchair with his knee secured in a brace. A paramedic stopped him just inside the room. He had heard enough from the hallway to understand what had happened. His eyes moved from Grant to Hensley, then finally to Simone. The arrogance was gone. "I am sorry," he said. The words sounded unfamiliar in his mouth. Simone waited. "For which part?" Blake glanced toward the gloves on the bench. "For deciding who you were before you spoke. For using Noah to prove something. For not stopping." Simone held his gaze. "Then remember this feeling when someone else has less power than you." Blake nodded slowly. She did not offer instant forgiveness, but she did not turn away. That was enough to make the apology real. Behind them, the repaired ceiling light burned steadily over the mat, exposing every face without shadow. 3 weeks later, Simone returned to the training center just after sunrise. The building was quieter than she remembered, the hallways washed in pale gold from the eastern windows. She carried the same tool bag, wore the same gray maintenance shirt, and moved with the same unhurried calm. Nothing about her appearance announced what had changed, but the room did. The old slogan above the mat had been removed. In its place, new black lettering stretched across the wall. "Control yourself before controlling others." Noah stood beneath it, leading a group of recruits through a lesson on judgment, restraint, and the responsibility to stop when another person asked. His voice shook slightly at first, but he did not hide behind volume. When one recruit hesitated, Noah paused the exercise and asked if they felt ready to continue. Simone noticed the difference immediately. So did Grant, who watched from the far side of the room with both hands resting on his cane. Blake sat near the benches with his knee brace removed, though he still walked carefully. He was no longer holding a phone. The old training videos had been deleted, and the department had replaced them with lessons focused on safety, accountability, and service. Hensley had lost his authority over the program. The investigation found that he had allowed humiliation to become part of the culture, and the department required every supervisor to complete new intervention training. The consequences were real, but Simone had insisted that reform mattered more than spectacle. Blake saw her near the doorway and stood. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he crossed the room slowly and stopped several feet away. "I have been thinking about what you said," he told her. "About deciding who someone is before they speak." Simone waited. "I did that to you," he continued. "I did it to Noah. I probably did it to more people than I can remember." His honesty did not erase the past, but it changed the direction of what came next. Simone nodded toward the recruits. "Then remember them." Blake looked back at the class. "I will." There was no dramatic forgiveness, no handshake for an audience, no instant return to comfort. There was only a promise that would have to be proven in smaller moments, day after day. Simone opened her tool bag and climbed the ladder beneath the fixture she had never finished repairing. The officers moved around her without laughter or whispers. No one asked why the maintenance worker understood the room better than they did. They knew now. Grant approached and placed the old pair of padded gloves on the bench, not as a challenge, but as a reminder. He looked up at Simone. "The board approved the new training standards," he said. "Your recommendations are in the final policy." Simone tightened a screw inside the fixture. "Good. They also asked whether you would consider teaching one class a month." She paused. For years, she had believed that returning to that part of herself would mean reopening every wound attached to it. But the room below no longer felt like the one she had entered weeks earlier. Noah was teaching people to listen. Blake was learning to step back. Grant had used his authority to make space instead of taking it. Simone thought of Lily at home, growing stronger each day, and of the kind of world she hoped her daughter would enter. "One class," she said. "We will start there." Grant smiled, then stepped away without asking for more. Simone replaced the cover and pressed the switch. Warm light spread across the mat, even and steady. Every face beneath it was visible. No shadows, no performance, no one made smaller so someone else could feel powerful. The lesson had never been about who could win a fight. It was about what strength looked like when pride was stripped away. Strength was stopping when someone asked. Strength was admitting harm. Strength was using power to protect the person with less of it. And sometimes, the strongest person in the room was the one who refused to become cruel, even after cruelty had found them first. As Simone climbed down, Noah asked the recruits one final question, and the room fell still enough to hear it clearly. When you are given power over someone else, what will you choose to do with it?